Good evening, everyone. Tonight I'm going to be talking about the golden child, the cream of the crop, the wonder boy. Seriously though, you can't walk 5 feet through a bakery review without seeing this guy. I'm of course talking about the croissant. But who is he and where did he come from? Like with most foods, the history of the croissant is long, complicated, and disputed, but most sources agree that it all started at the Battle of Vienna. Way back in 1683, the city of Vienna had been under siege by the Ottoman Turks for many months. One of the strategies used by the Turks was to try and dig tunnels underneath the city walls. Unfortunately for them, we bakers have dreadfully ungodly hours. In the middle of the night, one of the bakers heard some digging and immediately reported it to the city defenders. The tunnel was quickly collapsed and the city was saved just in time for King John III of Poland to break the siege. The city was so grateful for this baker that he was able to retire and live a wonderful life of luxury. Yeah, no. What really happened is they had him invent the kipfel, which was shaped like the crescent of the Turkish flag, so they could consume it. Now is where we get to the disagreement of the croissant's history. There are two different versions of this story. The first one is exciting and fun, the second one is probably more accurate. For the more fun version of the story, let's fast forward about 100 years into the future. Here we see the wonderful and completely rational Marie Antoinette, an Austrian princess living in Paris. Marie looks around Paris and thinks to herself, you know what this place could use? Kipfels. I haven't seen a kipfel since I got here. She immediately demands that her chefs make her kipfels, despite the fact that they have never seen a kipfel and she cannot describe how to make them. Through trial and error and several dead chefs, she finally has her kipfels and everyone was pleased. There isn't any real evidence for this scenario, and honestly the French love making stories about Marie Antoinette, so I'm gonna go with a no on this one. The second story for how the kipfel made it to Paris is much less interesting and requires us jumping forward another 100 years. This story involves an Austrian military officer named August Zang. August decided he'd like to retire in the wonderful city of Paris. Unfortunately for him, his bread was popular. Like, really popular, especially his kipfels. The Parisians absolutely loved all of his crap. Eventually, other French bakers adopted his recipe, and the kipfel slowly turned into the croissant we know and love today. So what makes a croissant a croissant? Is it just the shape? No, there are really two things that make a croissant what it is. First off is the dough. Croissants are made from a leavened pastry dough. Leavened means that it has some sort of leavening agent, like yeast, to make it all poofy and wonderful. While pastry dough means that it has a higher fat content than, say, bread dough. The second thing that makes a croissant amazing is something called the lamination process. To do this, you have to flatten out your dough and then put a big old slab of soft butter on top of it. After that, it's just fold and flatten, like a Japanese sword. And the more layers, the better. If you'd like a demonstration for the lamination process, click here. One thing to note is that the shape of the croissant is very important nowadays. A straight croissant means that it's made completely with butter, while a curved croissant means that at least some of it is margarine. Also, if you see something called a kipfel in the modern age, that is generally made out of bread dough instead of pastry dough. Finally, I'm going to talk about why you will see croissants in every review for every bakery ever. First, it's because the French love their croissants, and the French are pretty much the authority on bakeries. Someday I'll do a video on French bakery laws and regulations. It's extensive. Second, the croissant is technically advanced, with a lot of small steps that are easy to mess up. A very small change can make the difference between a good croissant and an amazing croissant, and usually you can tell within the first bite. Finally, the pastry dough used in croissants can be used in a lot of other things, like cinnamon rolls, strudels, and cannolis, so if you eat the croissant, you can kinda tell what those other ones are gonna taste like. Oh god, I don't have an outro, and I can't even make not having an outro my outro because these made of awesome people already do that. Oh well, I'll figure that out in time. Have a great night, everyone.